Do you have fully vacant units on your property that you have mothballed until next semester? If you do, I bet you've thought to yourself, we should list those on Airbnb for game day weekends or for parents visiting their kids. Maybe you're in a college town like Austin or Raleigh or Tallahassee, and your city has large festivals and not enough hotel rooms. You know you could lease those units on a nightly or a weekly basis. Providing short-term rentals on platforms like Airbnb can provide a great source of ancillary income. But it takes it takes a lot of organization. There's the additional setup of providing linens and coffee makers and all the little things that a short-term tenant will expect. Then there's the regulatory and tax issues that could require additional work. More importantly, there's the time and labor to market on all the multiple platforms, handle the reservations and cancellations, the cleaning, and then there's the bookkeeping. All of this turns into a big distraction from the main job at hand, which is operating and leasing your property. That's where Vector Travel comes in. These guys know the short-term rental industry and they know how to relieve all of those burdens from the property manager. And best of all, they've become experts in how to do that with student properties. They understand the complexity of mixing travelers with college students. They know it so well, they can quickly identify if a student property is not going to be a good fit for their program. So if you have vacant units, reach out to Vector Travel and have them do a free, no obligation assessment to determine if enrolling your vacant units in their program will be beneficial. Go to vectorstays.com/SHI. Fill out a quick form to receive more information. You will also get the first month's service fee waived by going to that specific landing page. Again, that's vectorstays.com/SHI. Welcome to the Student Housing Insight Podcast, where we're putting you in touch with the people who bring student housing to life. I'm your host, Wesley Dees, and joining me today is Gretta Dare.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Trying to not die of COVID. How are you?
Yeah, man, it's been something. We'll talk about that in a minute, but open this up on a good note. Guess what?
What?
This is the 100th episode of the Student Housing Insight Podcast. Can you believe that?
I seriously can't believe that. That's insane.
I wish I'd put together some kind of montage or whatever, but I mean, let's face it, that takes a lot of work. And between holidays and Omicron, and I just didn't have it in me to put all that together. Plus, I doubt everybody really wants to hear that. So, but yeah, 100 episodes. This is, I don't know. I mean, that's over 4 years, I guess. But
hasn't it been 5 now? Was it 4?
Well, it was 4 years in August when we started. So,
my goodness.
Yeah.
I still remember our first and second episodes. It's grown so much.
It's been a ride, and you've been here for all of it. Thank you very much. Yeah, so this is going to be a special episode, to say the least. We've got a interview with Julie Bonnin from Asset Campus, which I'm excited for folks to hear about. Talk about an industry veteran that's just got a lot of experience and a lot of wisdom. And I'm excited for folks to hear our interview. But hey, the last time you and I were co-hosting together, we were getting ready for LeaseCon.
Oh, is that right?
I think so. We were at least talking about it.
We probably were. Fair enough.
The last episode, we actually had Leslie Cole as the co-host, and we were talking about preparing for winter. So if you didn't get to listen to that, hey, there's still a couple more weeks left in the break, so you may want to go back and listen to that. But yeah, prior to that, I think we talked a little bit with the audience about LeaseCon coming up, and
which turned out to be amazing, by the way.
I thought it did too. I was a little concerned of how attendance would be, just because we came out Thanksgiving weekend. There's a new variant. It's and I was just like, nobody's going to come. And it was actually the last time it was there was a LeaseCon was in the fall of 2019. And actually, France Media reported back to me, or Interface, I should say, that they actually exceeded the numbers from 2019 for the in-person session. If you included they did do a hybrid version this year as well. So that would actually kind of put them over as far as attendance compared to 2019. But yeah, and if you didn't get to go, and this is maybe your first time hearing about it, you could still register to get the seat license to watch it virtually, which I've heard a lot of comments from folks that they really appreciated that. One thing that they mentioned was that those that did attend virtually is they wish they could have interacted asked some questions, that type of thing. And so I've already had, kind of a follow-up conversation with the folks at Interface, and that's definitely something we're going to look at doing for the next one, which we'll talk a little bit about. But yeah, just recapping, good attendance, given all the circumstances, given the timing of the year. I thought it was actually really good attendance. Really great content. What was your favorite? What was your favorite panel?
Listen, there was this really incredible panel that
you hosted.
I heard that the audience was really, really excited and really loud, and definitely louder than the one that was next door that TJ Chambers was hosting, where he was really boring and terrible. I mean, that was just the feedback that I heard. I'm just saying. Saying.
I got to tell you, I shared with the guys yesterday, one, that was a highlight because I was actually kind of out in the lobby witnessing that happening.
Love you,
between
TJ.
both, because I wanted to see what TJ, and then he also had on his panel, and forgive me, I'm not going to remember everybody, but he had Jordan Manley from CA Ventures and Jonathan Jeans from Be Home and someone from Peak, and I'm just drawing a blank on who it was. And I'm so sorry if you're that person listening right now, but I'd actually came up with that title when Rich Kelly and I were, kind of planning out the content. So I was really interested in seeing it, and they did a fantastic job. I don't know if you've gotten the link to go back and look at to look at all the sessions that were recorded, because obviously you didn't see it because you were in the other one, but they did a really fantastic job. It was on, managing and marketing within urban markets, and in metropolitan markets.
It's a great group. That's a fantastic group.
Yeah. And it's, like Atlanta has had a lot of explosion this past year in student housing, the Charlotte area. I'm not talking about areas like San Francisco and New York like that. That's a beast within itself. And, there's not even a lot of national operators in those markets, but, when it comes to, places like Denton, Texas and Fort Worth and, Austin, Raleigh, those kind of areas, Tallahassee, it's just a different beast because you're dealing with so many other things that are coming from the conventional side that could sometimes overshadow some things that you're trying to do in the market. And it takes a little bit of a different character to lease very well in those markets. So
absolutely.
It was great to hear from them on that. But yeah, so your panel was your favorite panel. Outside of that, what was your favorite panel? And you can't say it, full transparency. I did moderate 2 panels myself. But so you can't choose mine and you can't choose yours.
Oh, that was rude. I was going to say, because yours was great. No, I actually did sit in on a lot of the Turn panels. And the reason being was because of the fact that I do have a lot of exposure, obviously, to the leasing and marketing side. And so I did focus a little bit more on the Turn ones. I did think that the FFE, that one was moderated by Eli Ruth from Cardinal.
Yeah.
That one was really, really informative.
He did a good job on that.
He really did a great job. And so that one was really interesting as well. And so I did love the fact that this one did focus on both sides of the business. And so it was really, I don't know. I love this event. And I think that it's really, really just for our industry overall, I think that it's phenomenal. And it really, I want to see more people next year. I think that anyone that's listening, you need to write it down or email your regionals. You need to email your VPs, and you need to make sure that it's in your budget for people to go, because there was so many huge takeaways for planning and so much information and so much, honestly, and there was incredible networking and really so many amazing friendships taken away from it as well, beyond just like the learning, but so much incredible information.
Yeah. And as I mentioned earlier, we have already started discussions about the next one. This is something that I've kind of been working with the folks at Interface on almost in a partnership standpoint, because I do think this is so important to not only have this, but also to make sure that the content as well is such of an important event for our industry. And I want to make sure that the content stands up to it as well, because I've seen other groups that have tried to do student housing operations focused conferences, and to be honest, where they fell short was on the content, and over a period of time people just lost interest. And so I don't want that to happen with this. And so I've pledged to those guys that I will certainly help them make this the best that it can. So, hey, look, one of the biggest things that we even complained about amongst ourselves, as far as between myself and like Rich Kelly, was we didn't really have enough time to, market it and, get everybody on board. And so a lot of that was just due to, all the pandemic things that were going on. So we're going to be, planning this out probably 6 months in advance, from the time we initially start marketing to when we do it. We knew December was not the right month. We want to, we were previously doing it in September, made a lot of sense in September. But some of the feedback that we're hearing is even September is not the best time. So maybe a January, February, I don't know. We're going to be, and if you've got an opinion on it, please send me an email at contact@studenthousinginsight.com. Would love to hear your feedback on that. But anyway, we'll be making that announcement probably right around the same time that Interface does their big student housing event in Austin, Texas, which is more business investment focused versus operations focused. And just for those that may not have received the email yet, that has now been announced. I believe it's May 4th through 6th.
Mm-hmm. It's ending on a Friday this year.
Yeah, and they're not doing it in April. They typically do it in April, but for whatever reason, that was not going to work out this year. And so it's May 4th through 6th. Yeah, it's a Wednesday through Friday. We're going to be doing something. There'll be more information to come, but
I love it when I find these types of things out with everybody else.
Yeah. Well, no, you and I have talked about bringing back in 2020, we were launching market meetups, and none of those got to happen because of Corona. And
the disdain.
I know you're laughing because we've got we were introduced to the Flu-Rona concept this morning, which is a whole nother thing. But anyway, so we got introduced to Corona in 2020, and that canceled all of our market meetups. But anyway, there will be more information on the website as those get announced. But I think we're going to do one in combination with Interface for the University of Texas market. That Austin market. So if you're in that area, make sure that you sign up for that. It's outside of anything going on with Interface. It will likely even be at a different venue, but will be at the same time, so that folks that are coming from out of town that have properties in Texas can join. So anyway, that's coming up. We've got a lot of other stuff that's coming up in 2022. We're going to be launching a new website. We'll talk more about that in an upcoming episode. But you've been really busy with all of that.
I have. Not this week. This week I've been in bed. But outside of that, yes, I have been very busy, very excited about all of the student housing insights, changes and updates, and the creation of things, which, as you know, is my favorite thing to do in the entire world.
Well, I've got to see some previews of it, and I'm super excited about it. We also released, so there's a major component of the website is a video that we put together this past fall, and we actually introduced that video at LeaseCon, and we'll be putting it up we'll put it up on our YouTube channel once of course, sending it out to everything on social media once we get the website launched. So
love that video too.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun making, and I think it just captures everything that, that's at our core. So super excited for folks to see that. But the other thing that we're launching for 2022 is the podcast is going to be featuring a lot of profiles. I always open this up with, welcome to the Student Housing Insight podcast, where we're putting you in touch with the people who bring student housing to life. And, that's been kind of an important part of this podcast for me, is being able to, we're all in our companies, and some of us have worked for a lot of different companies and have got to meet, all of these industry leaders that we talk about. But some folks, haven't. They've worked with one company their entire career, or maybe just one or two. And, there's a very interesting story to be told within the student housing industry. And it's one I'm familiar with just because, I'm becoming old as dirt, and I've spent 25 years in this industry. And, you pick up on a lot of these things that have happened. But each month we're going to be doing a profile on, a certain industry veteran or executive, not necessarily someone that's been in the business for decades or anything like that. But there will be a lot of folks that have been in the industry for multiple decades that we'll be talking to. And that's what this first episode of 2022 and our 100th episode is about. And we're talking to Julie Bonnin, who is the Chief Operating Officer and Principal at Asset Living, used to be known as Asset Campus, but did a rebrand this past year, and they now go by Asset Living, which, man, they had a huge 2021.
No kidding.
Julie not only celebrated her 20th anniversary, but she was also named a principal, and they've done some magnificent acquisitions. Of course, the top 25 just came out, and they are, of course, again, the largest third-party manager of student housing and the second largest manager. That's by room count. I think they actually lead when it comes to properties, but I think ACC's got them beat on number of rooms or number of beds. But yeah, and we recorded this at LeaseCon, so we got to do it in person, which is always nice, at least for me. But what was really cool about this is you got to spend some time with Julie as well the evening before, having just kind of an impromptu conversation. And I'd love for you to kind of share some of that with the audience.
I did. And it was very impromptu, and it was...
Which is another great thing about live events is running into people and having great conversation.
Well, it's funny because I was sitting there thinking about the way that you just said that, the great thing about the podcast is that it kind of gives everyone access to people that they may not ever get access to. And I feel like that encompasses really what this opportunity is, because I think about when I worked on site, and even people in my corporate office team, like it's not like you get that opportunity. Like they may come by your office. You may have that opportunity where, a VP, an SVP, a COO or CEO, they come by your office and you meet them and you talk to them for like 15 minutes. And it's like, you don't really get to know them, or, you feel like they don't get to meet your personality or whatever, but you do want to know more about them. And so this gives that opportunity to really, have 30 or 40 minutes of really understanding more about who they are. And I love that. And honestly, when it comes to Julie, okay, so I am going to get really starry-eyed about this because Julie really is the real deal in student housing, in property management. And I feel really, really passionately about that, especially after spending time with her, so much time with her in person, about spending, listening to, even going back and re-listening to this entire podcast episode. And I think that, one of the things that I've talked about, anybody who knows me, I talked about, this conference that I went to years ago, and there was somebody who was on stage who was so passionately discussing home and living learning environments. And I felt so gripped by that. And it hasn't been since then that I felt so struck by somebody's authenticity before. And sitting there essentially with her, she is that, we were talking about the student experience and technology and doing the right thing and all of these things, this whole conversation and the humility, the realness, it's all there. And she's so smart and she's so knowledgeable, and I don't have enough good things to say. I just don't. I really don't. And I think I honestly, I'm so filled with gratitude over the fact that I got to spend that time with her. And I couldn't possibly think more highly of her, honestly. And I think that I really hope that there's more time in the public, more time that people get to be around her.
Yeah.
Grateful, and I'm glad that she's in our industry. I think that we are lucky to have her in this industry, truly. And I hope that more people get to be impacted by her influence, because I think that we're greater for it.
Yeah. Julie and I have had several conversations over the years, be it from working together on transactions, or if it's, truth be told, Julie's interviewed me before, right? And we've she didn't hire me,
how dare she?
Yeah. But no, we've had a great relationship over the years, and she's been someone that, like, if there's just something that's got me stuck that I can't seem to get my hands around, she's been completely open to have a quick chat and say, well, hey, maybe you should think about, doing it this way. And that's been, that's been so helpful. I can only think of actually one time that's actually happened, and she was so gracious with it, and I really appreciated that. But, I know other folks have had conversations with her like that from other companies as well. And so from that standpoint, she really does. Outside of, Asset's a huge company, and they've got, a lot of talented people there, but she really is someone that sees or believes that this industry is going to get, only going to get better if we all communicate with each other and help each other. And she's been a living testimony of that. So at some point in time, she's definitely going to be getting a lifetime achievement award.
I was just thinking that.
Well, and it's so cool. I want to go ahead and get to the interview because it's so cool. We get a little bit of the history of Asset and how, she didn't want to be a part of, she didn't want to have anything to do with student housing. And it's something that Mike McGrath just kind of, put in her lap. And so we'll get into that. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump to the interview, unless if there's anything else you want to bring up.
No.
Awesome. All right, guys, enjoy this. Julie, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, it's been a long time coming. I've been, we've done a lot of things throughout the year, both in 2021 and 2020, as it related to webinars and the folks at Asset have been such of a good or great help in that. Jason Ford, Jessica Mancuso, they've been just fantastic guests on the podcast and with our webinars. And I keep saying, guys, I got to get Julie on. So I'm so thankful that you were able to hey, we got to do this in person. We're at LeaseCon in Dallas this week. And I had you on a list of folks I wanted to interview in 2022, just to kind of get their, the veterans of the industry to kind of get their take on things. And when I saw that you were going to be at this conference, I was like, yeah, I got to pack up the podcast equipment and see if I can get Julie to spend some time. But speaking of 2021, it's been a pretty exciting year for both Asset, but you as well, named principal. I know that's kind of been something that has been a part of your relationship with Asset, probably since the beginning, but officially got that title added. And then also, man, you guys are doing some incredible things with acquisitions and taking over other management platforms. Just tell me a little bit, for those in the audience that may not be familiar with Asset and your role there. Walk us through what your role looks like today.
Well, thank you, Wes. I'm excited to be here. Probably should have done this some time ago, but you got me. So my role, it's exciting times over at Asset, and when they moved me into a principal role, it's been a great honor because I've always felt I had ownership in this company because I believed in this company from day one.
You've certainly always acted like it. I can tell you that.
Well, thank you. As I move into my next phase of my career, my main role is making sure we have the necessary resources within our operations platform to be successful, looking at new initiatives and technologies, that can help enhance the operations, which are some exciting things that we're doing on that front within Asset. I've always had a passion for really working with our business development team members and helping them pursue business opportunities because I've always felt in the third-party business, you've got to constantly working the third-party business line. So I've moved more, I've been a little bit more active in that now that I have a really good operational arm underneath me. And then, I really still try to stay in contact with a lot of our senior leadership team members. I want to hear what's going on with them, the challenges they're having. I've got a really awesome, we elevated Stacy Lakoki to EVP back in October. She's sort of taking the reins of the day-to-day, operations.
Stacy's in Dallas, right?
That's correct. And she's going to be here today.
Awesome.
So, my role is sort of to mentor the next generation of leaders. And in my role as principal, I can sort of go to any vertical I want and help where I'm best suited. And I have a passion for strategies and technologies and just really making sure that we're sort of positioning ourselves for the next wave that comes, whatever that wave looks like. So it's been an interesting ride. As a company, I couldn't be prouder. We currently on the student side have roughly 120,000 beds under management, which is about 245 properties in 44 different student markets.
Wow. We
continue, to evolve. We have another vertical, which is our multifamily. This is where we're seeing a lot of growth. We're currently, we're doing a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and we've closed on 3 of them this year. And so that vertical is going extremely well. We're probably going to be announcing a 4th one by the end of the year. So I'm really exciid. And what's great about Asset...
Now, today is December 14th.
There's going to be another one, I promise you. But what's really great about the growth is that student housing, I feel like I've cultivated a lot of the leaders that have been there because they've worked with me. I've been with the company close to 20 plus years.
You celebrated 20 years this year.
Thank you. I feel like I've not only raised my family, but my work family.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of these men and women in, CA positions now into major leadership roles within the company. So that's exciting. And that's, and what's helping, there's a lot of talent in the student side that we've been able to farm over to our multifamily side to help manage their growth and that's going on over there. So I think it's going to continue to be exciting. We've got a couple of deals working even on the student side on the acquisition, which I can't really convey just yet, but there's a few things percolating on that front too.
Well, awesome. 20 years. I think the longest I've been at a company was 8.5 years. And, people looked at me like, I had 2 heads that I'd been with a company that long. But this isn't your first stint of being with the company for 20 years. We'll get more into that. I think probably where we need to go to now is just let's get the origin story. Where did you grow up? What's your career leading up to now? What has that been like? Give us the Julie story.
Sure. I mean, as you can tell, I've been around a while. I grew up, I was raised in a small town, not a small town, but in Kirkwood, Missouri, which is west of St. Louis. Grew up, had a great childhood. Didn't realize what we didn't have, but we were happy. Yeah. And pure Midwestern values, and one of 4 children, and we each took different paths. And I got out of high school early. I was sort of I wanted to get to the next chapter, so I graduated almost a year early, and I went to the University of Missouri up in Columbia, and after a couple of years, thought I knew what I knew, and I was sort of going to be the college dropout, and I heard that Houston was boomtown and that I needed to get down to Houston. So I traveled down to Houston in 75, and it was crazy back in those days, and found a job within like 3 days working for a local developer who really turns out to be one of the iconic developers in Houston. I worked for a gentleman by the name of Wayne Duddleston that was instrumental in bringing like the Houston Rockets into the town and building a lot of, at that time I was heavily into the conventional side, a lot of office buildings, and he got into the multifamily space. I worked with him for like 20 years, but I did so many different roles with him. I got really enjoying the finance and equity side of things. And I remember the early days, when Mr. D, we called him, would be on the floor with all of us putting together presentations and explaining what he was trying to accomplish. And he finally encouraged me to go back, finish my education. He says, you need to go back, go to U of H, finish your education, which I was somewhat reluctant, but I did because I had great respect for the man. Yeah. And then we got really, really busy, and then life changes happened, and I had to stop again. And I had like 21 hours left to graduate, and I never did finish. So I call myself the college dropout. But I worked with him and, loved every minute of it, learned a lot from him. And then
Quick question. Did you have any exposure to the real estate industry prior to going to work? I mean, was your family involved with it? Was it something you looked at while you were at school? Or
I never had any exposure other than into my finance classes.
Gotcha.
Something that I've always been a numbers person, and I like the investment side of things, so I sort of gravitated to that. When I was in high school, I held down 3 jobs, and one of them was working for a gentleman that did a lot of bond indentures that was associated with real estate. I sort of knew I didn't want to go that route of the real estate, so I wanted to try something different. And it gave me the opportunity. It was a small family company that just grew, and it grew quite exponentially back then.
Family companies are great. The 8.5 years that I mentioned, it was with a small company, probably nowhere near the size of what you were talking about. But going back to what you said about being able to wear so many hats, I got to see things from cradle to grave, and it's something that the rest of my career has always benefited from. And even when that company was kind of no longer a vessel, because of it was very small, and the Great Recession was something that just put that company on hold. And when I started interviewing with other student housing companies, they didn't know what box I went into, because I was probably like applying for a regional manager position or something like that. But I had all this exposure from a development standpoint and from an ownership standpoint that they really didn't know what box to put me into. But my career's been so great for it. And, if there's, maybe you agree with this too, but I've always told folks, if you can get yourself into a small company where you can wear those different hats, it is so worth it. I love the big companies because they, they teach a lot about operations and, standards and things like that, which is key. But just something about working for a small, especially family-owned real estate company.
I would echo that. I mean, I learned so much from those days. And then Mr. Dullston didn't have he had 3 children, but neither one of his children wanted to take over the business. So his exit strategy was to sell the organization, and he sold it to Aimco, and which I stayed there for a few years. It just wasn't a fit for me. And then Aimco also indicated at that time they didn't want to do third-party management and gave me an opportunity to move the business, find a place to park myself, find an employer. And so I was younger at that time, so I went to another organization that I thought was the right fit, but I made it for the wrong reasons. And I sort of look back, I purely made it purely on the financial economic side because they're going to pay me a ton of money. The worst decision I've ever made in my career. And I lasted 1 year because my integrity and character meant more to me than working for a company that I didn't believe in their values, and I didn't appreciate how they were treating the clients. Yeah. And so then it was during that time frame where I was going to take some time off, some time just to regroup myself once I decided, I wasn't going to be working for the organization, that I get a call at that time from Mike McGrath, who was the owner and principal of Asset Plus, and said, "Hey, here you're on the market. Please don't accept anybody's offer until you have a chance to talk to us." And so I took a couple of weeks off, came back into Houston, visited with them, and I immediately felt like this is another family business I could get comfortable with. And it's been something it's been a great ride for me. And I started out on the multifamily side of things.
How many student housing properties at that point in time?
At that time, there was another group of individuals that were sort of running the student platform. And at that time, we had like maybe 15 or 16 properties. But there was what I call a separation of in 2004, where they sort of formed their own company. Mike kept his student property. So when I took over the student housing, and actually I didn't take over the student housing, Mike McGrath came to me not once, but I think 3 times, asking me to just handle this until they could find somebody to handle student housing, and we'll figure it out. And I didn't have a choice, so I took it. And I'm one of these individuals that if you give me something, I'm going to learn it and make something of it. And so, as fate has it, we started off with these 4 assets, and it was me and another person sort of doing student while I'm maintaining my conventional portfolio. I had a good friend of mine that had worked for a developer that had 4 properties that they were self-managing. They said, "Hey, we're here. You're doing student. Can you take a look at these properties?" And those 4 properties was the old, what we consider the old Crossing Place, a hotel developer out of Florida, had them, and they sort of said, "Operate these. We're going to probably exit out in a few years." And during that time frame, I really got, those first couple of years, really got to know student housing, recognize that there's a lot of things I don't know. And we really started putting a lot of the infrastructure and the SOPs together and starting to form a management company. And through that whole process, I've always been a person that contacts are critical and get to know who the people are. I came across, when they were marketing the portfolio, the brokerage firm at the time was ARA, and I met Pat Jones for the first time. And I got to know him and what his clients were looking for. And every time there was a tour on that property, I was up there meeting those prospects too. And I was giving my voice and credentials to the success of the property, the market, and everything else. And I got to know that these people are thriving, are thirsting for information.
That's so, yeah, I'm butt in there for just a second. I think that's such a key point. And I would really encourage, because you and I were talking a little bit before we hit the record button, and about that experience with working closely with a broker. And that's something I would encourage, because a lot of times I see someone, in a regional position or maybe even a vice president position on the operations side, kind of, once a broker is introduced into something, I feel like folks on the operations side tend to say, okay, well, now these guys are going to, kind of write their own story about, the asset or whatever. And that's just like, those guys are starving for information. And you got to understand your client, regardless if they build it to hold for 10 years or 50 years or 2 years, there is some type of exit strategy with that asset. And if you're fortunate enough to find yourself on the operation side when something's being sold, work with those brokers, work with the folks that are trying to and just insert yourself into it, because sometimes brokers have a hard time asking for help. But that's such a cool thing that you're mentioning there, because I think folks that do that end up getting a huge benefit, and just really their eyes become open to such of a bigger part of what this industry is about. So,
well, what opened up for me was that not only, I was fairly new myself in the student housing space, so just getting to know who those individuals were and who was buying the assets and what they were looking for was invaluable information to secure, which allowed me to tailor things that if I saw something, I could ping some of these potential clients about information. And I, worked those relationships for probably 3 or 4 months. And I finally told my boss, I said, hey, I'm going to make a business trip. You're going to come on with me. And I had 6 appointments lined up. They started down in San Diego, and they went all the way up to Yakima, Washington, our first road trip. And I told Mike, I said, let's go. Mike McGrath, I've got these people that are interested in talking to us. And it was interesting. We went in, we actually, went into all these offices, had some great meetings, and we came back with 6 management contracts.
Wow.
And that sort of launched the student housing, because no one at that time was really going out there knocking on the doors for the business.
Yeah.
I mean, it's changed. There's a lot of competition now. Yeah. And, I've been very fortunate, to be able to nurture a lot of great relationships that, has had a very loyal following, not only to me, but to the organization.
Yeah. So obviously Mike had to push you into, I think he pretty much just threw student housing on your lap from what it sounds like. But what is it about student housing that has excited you, that's kept you engaged? What is it that, because it is one of those things that you either love it or you hate it. So obviously for 20 years with Asset, I've got to imagine there's at least some love with it.
Well, it's interesting. When I got into it, I didn't know what to expect. But as I start to understand the fundamentals of it, it's all strategic planning, it's deadlines, it's you're moving at such a fast pace. I like the dynamic aspects of student housing. For me to go back to, and I'm not knocking anything on the conventional side, but I would have a hard time going back on a conventional property where I'm doing 3 or 4 leases a week when I'm doing maybe 30 in a day during the peak of a leasing season. It's fast paced, and and managers that are on these properties, there's just a lot thrown at them. There's so much going on, and I also like the dynamics of the space in general. I love talking and listening to our student staff, the energy that they bring, the things that they bring to your attention. One of the things that I try to, instill in our teams, that there is no dumb idea. If you see something or you think something, that if I have a college student that has come up with, some creative way to market or a new technology, we'll take a look at. And I don't think, they're on the cutting edge of what coming up. So listening to them, working with the dynamics of the staff has made it interesting. But, like I said, I have always gotten the rush out of what keeps me, excited in this space is that I look up and down the hallways and the people that are employed in various positions and in leadership positions. I feel like I like creating opportunities for people. I think I have had a part in creating a lot of opportunities, but help growing the business. During those earlier years, now I've got a phenomenal team that does that for us. I'm there to help support and mentor them as needed. But nothing gives me a greater rush than seeing, somebody that started at the site level all of a sudden in an SVP position. So and managers into regional positions or marketing positions, are we moving them over to the multifamily? So as long as we're growing and I can continue to help create opportunities for people, that's what excites me.
Yeah. Now, Mitch, to you earlier, I have come to know Jason Fort quite a bit over the past year as he's helped us out with some things, and I always ask people kind of that origin story of how did you get started and that type of thing, and him along with, I think folks like TJ Chambers and, have kind of come back to you to say, she's kind of the one that, like you weren't necessarily the one to hire them, right? But once they showed that they had some interest and they wanted to, at some point in time, they intersected with you. And at that point, that's just when things really took off for them. Things clicked for them. And so, yeah, you've had a huge impact, certainly not just within Asset, but I think across the industry as a whole.
Well, thank you for that. I feel like I've been doing it a very long time. So, that's the past. Let's chat a little bit about, the future of student housing. Is there anything on your radar that gets you excited about the future or anything that concerns you maybe about the industry? I think what excites me about the student housing sector is that it's a viable asset class. It wasn't always like that in the early years. So we've come a long way, but it worries me at times that I feel like we've sort of maybe lost our mission on, what we need to go back to our roots. We got to get back to taking care, giving the customer experience. I think that's a little bit lacking at times because as investment money comes into the space, there's a different focus on, the priorities. So I think with a lot of the new technologies that are coming out with, online leasing is a mainstay, and the data analytics that go along with the marketing, the web presence and everything else. Last time I looked, probably about 75-80% of our leasing's done online. They don't even come in and tour. So we're sort of looking at, okay, we've got individuals. Our leasing initiatives in the offices have changed a little, but it's allowed us to get focused a little bit more on the customer experience and trying to, bring that back to where it was, because I felt that was lacking. One of our core values is, everybody deserves a home. Even our students that are doing, they're going to have 4 to 5, 6 years sometimes living, in a student market. This is their temporary home. We want them to have a great experience, and that's by trying to deliver great customer service. That's about acknowledging their names and
those things cost money.
And so now we sort of have a little bit of latitude to where, a lot of the resources, that we're doing the leasing can focus on that aspect. So I think it's sort of interesting. It's good to see some of the new technologies that have come in to make it a little bit easier on that aspect. And it's really up to our on-site teams and our middle management teams to really emphasize, about focusing on the customer.
Yeah. It's so funny because I have to be careful. Obviously, I'm on the consulting side, within this industry as well, and I've had clients that have come to me and said, "Hey, we want you to evaluate this project, or we want to talk to you about the underwriting on it." And if and there's been on more than one occasion that that group has said, "Well, we took this over to Asset, and Julie just said that this underwriting didn't make sense." And I've looked them square in the face and said, "If Julie is telling you that this isn't going to make it, then you need to listen." so yeah, it's in both of those situations, there were things that it was on the operation side. It was nothing on the development side. From an underwriting standpoint, it was the operations and where they were cutting things, either from a marketing standpoint, certainly from a resident retention standpoint, and the efforts that are thrown to that each year. So yeah, good to hear you say that.
Yeah, I've been known to be the deal killer within the company, or what I consider like the voice of reasoning. We get it. Underwriting numbers are very thin in a lot of these. They're buying properties at a 4 cap now and trying to make numbers work with rising costs that are going all around you. And you've got to get creative. And there are sometimes, you have to have those hard discussions. Say, look, we're a great operator, but if you think I can hire a manager for $60,000 that's going to operate an $80 million, you need to up this to like 75 to 80,000 plus bonuses.
Yeah.
And your payroll costs should be representative, not 11% of your GPR, should be equivalent to like 14 to 15% of your GPR. I've said I can prove the data all day long because I'm a data analytics person. So, we'll try to, we're really honest and candid. And if a client says you have to operate this way, we will work within their guidelines. But if the results, we tell clients, if the results aren't happening, we're going to have to pivot quickly. And sometimes we may not be the best operator for you because we're not going to tell you something can be done if it can't be done.
So no, I completely agree with you on that. And I talked to you a little bit about our, my visit in the UK, and things seemed from a management standpoint were way more efficient because there was this kind of den mother figure that was, at each of the properties, but outside of that, leasing and maintenance and everything were done centrally. And that's another podcast for another day, but the customer service was pathetic. I mean, just absolutely pathetic because there was nobody there giving customer service. But at the same time, the students seemed completely fine with it. I don't know that will ever happen here in the U.S., but I want to kind of pivot a little bit on that question. When it comes to things that are concerning you or things that you feel like need to change, a lot of times we have to look to our suppliers and service providers to do that. You guys were very instrumental with, with the, I don't want to say the conception of Entrata, but making Entrata something that was going to be very student focused when it came out of the box. And you guys worked very hand in hand with them on that. Coming from that, that particular experience, and then also kind of seeing what we're struggling with, what some of the challenges are, or what's on the horizon with student housing. If you had vendors that were sitting here in this room with us, what would be the kind of, not necessarily advice, but what would you be telling them of what we need in this industry? What kind of problems do we need them to solve in this industry?
That's a good question. I'm going to careful on how I respond. I mean, there's just so many different verticals you can go with this question. One of the things I think we need a lot of help and assistance in is organizing our turn process. I think a lot of us still, we've got a lot of maintenance personnel that still like to use the make ready board and keep everything up.
The paper ones.
The paper ones. And so I think as technology evolves, I think, trying to fine tune the turn process, and we've sort of last year piloted 2 companies that we worked with. We'll probably, at our size, probably engage at both of them to get involved in most of our properties for next year. But just to have a process to where, where it's centrally located, that the vendors can pick up their assignments, and that there's a tracking of when they go into the units, when they're completed. I have a record when, one of my staff members goes in and checks the unit, and if it's not ready, they can ping something on through one of these apps to have them go back. So I think it's been exciting to see some of that technology coming in. It's not quite there yet, but there's some good companies out there trying to figure it out. That's definitely a need. Like you mentioned with Entrata, they're a great partner. They really have listened to the student housing operators in this space to try to fine tune it. We're constantly working to improve on items with them, and they've got some interesting products coming up. One of the conversations that I've sort of threw out there, I haven't gotten a response, but with this demographic, we're having residents wanting to pay the rent with Bitcoin or some sort of ETF. So it's Entrata. Where does Entrata stand in maybe accepting that kind of currency? So there's a lot of things, in the future that we're pressing Entrata to take a hard look at. I also think with our demographic, it's all about convenience and flexibility and doing it on their time. So we're looking at companies that offer the self-guided tours, ones that, can maybe help us save on some of the...
Not just virtual self-guided online, actually coming onto the property.
Coming onto the property, they can register online and get an assignment slot assigned to them. They can go tour at their leisure. You put these special smart locks on the 1 or 2 doors that you're showing. So if they want to come in, at any given time, I mean, within restrictions, I mean, we sort of lock it down by 9:00. But if you want somebody to tour at 7, they can have access to the area and they can sort of self-guide. We have a record who's in there. We also feel it will help out, like even during the weekends where we can have the self-guided tours, because a lot of times people don't really want to see a face. They just show me the product.
Yeah.
So we're sort of looking at some of that technology that's out there, which will allow our teams to focus on what I talked about earlier, the customer experience. I think the more options you give a resident is going to help you, garner a greater share of prospects down the line. I mean, we're talking to various companies that offer, flex payment options to where we get all of our money up front at the beginning, but the resident makes an application with a provider that will pay their rent and then pay them a fee to pay it out over a period of time. So I think there's just, in this industry, what I have learned and what I continue to learn every day is that there's always something new that enters in, and having the ability to see and connect, hey, this could really help the industry, is something that I love trying to find what that next thing is. And, like we talked earlier, I mean, Asset's been around for, 32, 33 plus years. We've been very, very loyal to our vendors that partner with us on some of these initiatives. So if there's something new out there, something that we should be looking at, I mean, we are open to it, and we're actively trying to find what the next thing is that will help with the leasing process or anything that can benefit our resident base.
Well, fantastic. I think the vendors that are listening to this podcast, and there's a lot to do, that there's a lot there that they can take away from, and now they have their assignments. So Julie, the SHI audience is mostly made up of site level and regional level managers, and I put myself in their shoes, and I'm, maybe they're at a point where they're considering, making the student housing industry something that's going to be a long career for them, and they're kind of looking at next steps and what they need to do to for the next promotion or just their own personal growth within the industry. What advice would you have for those managers and those employees?
I've given a lot of advice out over the years, and most of the time it's listened to. Other times I question, did you not listen to me? But, I think it's important for the community managers to understand and recognize that they bring incredible value to their properties. It is such an important position, and it cannot be underestimated. They're almost like their own CEOs, and they need to act like a CEO. That's one of the advice I tell. Act like a CEO. Hold your team accountable. Set the expectations, but you also set the tone in that office. If you've got to be, on your game, keep, if you're having troubles, keep it at the front door. You've got to come prepared. And I'm a little bit old school, so I teach a little of some of the old school traits that probably don't get always taught all the time, because everybody is, it's all online. We can look at here. We got it at our fingertips. No, I believe that, as the CEO, every day you come in, you should have a 5 or 10 minute drill down with your top 3 personnel. You should have your leasing manager in there. You should have your facilities director in there, and you should have your AGM, and you should have all the reports pulled as the manager. Yeah. So you can sort of indicate, okay, we've got collection issues. I need an update by the end of the day where we stand here. Set the expectations, find out why certain leads aren't closed out, or why haven't they been followed up. I think if your team knows that you're looking at these things and what's expected, they'll respect you more, and you'll get a lot more production out of them. I also think as the GM, it's imperative that you build a dynamic team. You've got to have everyone working together. It's just not one person that makes that operation go. It's the whole team from the back of the house to the front of the house. And if you've got, I think in this position, I think it's so hard, especially nowadays with staffing, constraints that we have across the country, not only in our business, but industry as a whole. You know, if you've got somebody that's bringing down your team, you know, you've got to be the leader and make whatever necessary changes are to get that tone back, because one person can sink your team. And too many times I see people holding on to individuals that probably should have been let go because it's not a healthy environment.
Yeah.
So don't hold on to the dead weight. You need to let go of the dead weight and get the team going in the right direction. I also think that you need to invest in yourself. I think you need to constantly train yourself, pick up new skills, read, get involved in your local industry, your local apartment association or whatever industry avenues you have, and invest in yourself. If you expect a company to invest in you, you need to take time to invest in yourself. So I think a born leader will take that time. Another one, especially when you're in a larger organization, you know, I always tell people you need to put political capital over here in this column here. So if assignments come up and you have the time to give, volunteer for them, because you'll get exposed to other senior team members in the organization. You'll learn a different skill set. It makes you much more visible and marketable, you know, within the organization. So don't be afraid to not volunteer. I think it's an invaluable. Some people thrive at it. Some people attempt it and say, "No, I want to handle just what I'm handling." And that's fine too.
Yeah. We need more managers that, because I do think there's, in this industry, you get a lot of folks that they get to that general manager position, you know, fairly quickly. And, you know, they may spend, you know, a cycle, 2 cycles, and they get very bored really quick, and seem that they're bored. I think what it really comes down to is, you know, they haven't got that dopamine shot of getting a promotion in a couple of years, and that they feel like, you know, they're not worthy or something. And, you know, I've had this conversation over and over again with folks. You know, I've been in this industry for 25 years and have been outside of, you know, working day to day, you know, on site for, you know, probably 15 of those years. And it's, there's times I'll look at other, you know, industry veterans that came in at the same time that I did. I'm like, wouldn't you just love to go back on site? No, it's the only thing you had to do was make sure everybody was happy on site. And, I can't stress that enough. There is absolutely nothing wrong with being a general manager, or community manager, as they're called in some places within our industry. And, you know, making that the best because if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing there, the opportunities will end up coming. And to your point, when there's those takeovers that are, you know, a couple of states over, and it's a, you know, 2-3 hour drive for you to get there, from a management company perspective, having you know, volunteer that time away from your family, that time away from, you know, your own property to help take something over. One, it really exposes you to those corporate officers and folks, you know, that are looking within your company of the next person that they've got to hire, but also just going through that process of, you know, helping evaluate, you know, another asset and identifying, you know, the strengths and the weaknesses. It's a big opportunity. And I would certainly encourage people to make sure that they put themselves on that list to be called upon.
I don't disagree. I mean, you know, I think sometimes, you know, our community managers, I mean, I can tell you firsthand, you know, because I talk to a lot of clients. I mean, I could have the best regional, I could have the best SVP, I could even have Julie Bonnin on the asset. They don't care. It's that community manager that drives the engine on these properties. Yeah. And being proficient in all aspects of that position, you know, it's a skill set, and it's highly sought after. So, I mean, you know, these managers are going to should know more about the property, the market conditions than anyone at the corporate level. Sometimes the clients will probably know more because they've got a vested financial interest in these properties, so they challenge you. I mean, we can talk a whole segment about involvement of the clients, because now they're leveraging, there's 40, 50%, 60% sometimes equity in these deals, so they're very involved. So having that manager that can, communicate effectively to the clients what's going on in the marketplace is critical. And that's sometimes, and our clients are wanting to hear from these managers. They're going to know, I mean, I expect our community managers to know what's going on in the marketplace, and not necessarily waiting for a regional. Somebody said, hey, this floor plan is really moving in the marketplace, we can bump them $20. I expect that manager to know that and make those recommendations when we're having those daily or weekly calls. I mean, don't wait around for your regional to tell you what to do. You should know what's in that. You should know your market. And if you don't, you're doing yourself and your property a disservice. Get out there and understand what's going on in the marketplace so you can make effective and timely recommendations to your ownership group, because you're the first line, and that's how a lot of these clients look at it. So I think the community managers play an invaluable role in our overall success, but I think there's also great opportunities for individuals that want to move along in their career to make it a long career path. I never thought at age 20 that I'd be, I hate to even say this, but I've been in property management for the last almost 40 years of my life, and I've never thought I would ever see. This was not the path that I sort of chose. Yeah. It's a path that I was fortunate that I fell into, and I just saw the passion in it, and I wanted to be part of it.
Yeah.
So I went and, I think there's opportunities. I think, like you said, volunteering, assisting where you can, and even with an asset, we have some wonderful programs. We have the Asset Ambassador program, where we sort of send applications out, people that want to join it, that are out there on our social media platforms, are really sort of selling the great benefits of what our site team members are doing. And if you don't want to go that route, we have a TOPS program. I mean, there's just so many neat programs within the organization that we can you can move into if you want to make this a career path.
Hey, one thing that you mentioned there was kind of, having those reports and all those things, not just, maybe it's not memorized, but certainly you've got your hands on those numbers and can always be able to report those. And I think you said, tell the story. Mm-hmm. And I told a manager recently that, we were talking a little bit about, he had his property I serve as an asset manager for, and we were going through his monthly operating statement and going over his variance report. And you've sat through enough of those, you know how some of these variance explanations can just be, well, no duh. that's I can look at the numbers and figure that one out. and I just impressed upon him, like, I know how to ask you the deeper questions in order for you to tell the story, but this narrative has to be the story. And, or you've got to be able to tell that story and within the narrative. And then, and just explained to him, I said, every asset has a story, and you may not always be able to be the author of that story, but you will always be the storyteller with that story. And it's important for you to understand how that has to be communicated in order for, if the asset is needing something, you've got to be able to explain that and communicate it to somebody. If it's, doing well, you need to make sure that you're showing people this is doing well, this is paying off. And because if you're not telling that story, nobody's going to know the story. So, right. Julie, any final words? I appreciate so much your time and love your wisdom. Is there any other final points or words of wisdom that you have for our audience?
I really don't have any additional words of wisdom. I just think this is an exciting time to be in student housing, and I think just recognizing as a community manager, you're the one that's going to ignite your team. And I just think you just need to be vigilant about, being present, being that teacher, being a mentor to them, and try to part off some of your wisdom, and do not be afraid to try to train your replacement.
Absolutely.
And so, I think people that get into this, they get it for a reason. There's a passion there that you don't get in other parts of the real estate.
Yeah.
So I think it's exciting. I've been thrilled and it's been sort of like the joy of my life, really working in the student housing space. I was brought into it kicking and screaming, and I think probably Ryan's going to have to pull me out kicking and screaming. So I've really enjoyed the time with you and explaining or spending some time sort of talking about my career journey, and hopefully I imparted some wisdom to some of the future leaders of this space. And I'm
absolutely. You've, just throughout my career, you have been a voice of leadership. And from that standpoint, I want to personally thank you for not just that impact that you've had on my life, but through the industry over the past couple of years of getting through this pandemic. You've taken a very instrumental role, along with others like Miles Worth and Christine Richards that have said, "Look, industry, we've got to come together," and you've certainly been a big part of that as well. And honestly, I don't know. I'm sure we would have all gotten through it without your help, but it has been, I think we've all been able to sleep a little bit better at night because of folks like you that were making sure that we were all communicating and helping get through this.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, this industry is unique. I mean, even though we're competitive, I think most of us at the C level are really close and have great respect for one another because we know what it takes to be successful. So it's been, like I said, I have enjoyed the ride. I really don't want it to end, but everything ends eventually. But it's been a phenomenal, like I said, a phenomenal opportunity to work for a couple great, amazing companies. I mean, not everybody can say that they worked for amazing. I can actually say I've worked for 2 amazing companies in my career.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. And I'm glad that you've spent the latter part of that career on the student housing side. And I know Asset is making some big moves into acquiring more on the conventional side. But love your passion for not just the industry, but for your people as well. And just thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to say it again. I love having a conversation with Julie. She's so insightful, and I can't thank her enough for taking the time out and spending with myself and sharing this with the audience. So, any other parting thoughts?
No, I'm gonna go crawl back into bed.
Yeah, for all of those out there that are having to deal with this stinking Omicron variant COVID mess,
Get well soon.
get well soon. Fortunately, this does not seem to be very severe. It has gone through my family, and I had COVID back in really bad case of Delta back in January
That was terrifying.
Yeah, back in July and August, and spent 15 days in the hospital. And I haven't even, there was this whole thing about natural immunity, and I've still got it. It went through our entire family. And so it doesn't seem to care if you've got natural immunity or vaccinated immunity. It's ripping through the population. So, but fortunately it's just the sniffles and the fevers and not that crappy pneumonia stuff that I had. So please, everybody, get well, take your vitamins, take your zinc. I can't express enough how much that's helped me. But anyway, getting beyond all that, just want to remind everybody, please make sure that you share this episode with your friends. And also, if you're not a member of the Student Housing Insight community, make sure that you go to our website and click on the login tab up in the upper right-hand corner. We're about to make some huge major improvements to the community, and I want to make sure that you're a part of that. And so if you go ahead and sign up now, you'll get the email notification once we do those upgrades. And hopefully everything will happen perfect so that your account can be ported over. But we will see. Greta, thanks so much for hanging in there and being a co-host for me on this very special 100th episode.
I wouldn't have missed it. Absolutely.
All right, guys, take care. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.